Before we do, Gail, I'd love to pass it off to you just to share a little bit about your new book. So first of all, huge congratulations on that. To share a little bit about the content of the book. And I think you had a question that you were going to ask the audience as well. And then from there, we'll get into the interview.
I was, exactly. We have some poll questions for you so that I can tailor the learning and today's discussion for you. So I wrote this book, The Truth About Collaborating, Why People Fail and How to Succeed. And yes, it is a pandemic book. I actually wrote it during COVID-19, so it'll stand out in memory. I wrote it for two reasons. Number one, everyone here is being tasked with collaborating. And I found that by working with clients and hearing their pain points, many of them were being asked to collaborate without the proper tools. And so today I'm going to be defining collaboration as agreement and disagreement in an assertive and trusting environment that's centered around the goal. And what I find, especially with COVID-19, is that a lot of people are identifying their goals as deadlines. The goal is getting the work done. And in the context of our discussion today, I'm looking at a goal as an overriding vision, something that drives everybody together. Like the goal might be to help customers have an easier and more efficient experience. And that's the reason why I wrote the book, Jessica. That was the primary motivation. The second was to give people templates and tools. And so what I want to do is to address the questions that you have and also provide you afterwards with a tip sheet that will help to support you after today to make the time spent with us worthwhile.
Wonderful. Perfect. And I like that. So really, again, the goal of this session today is to be able to give you very tangible tools, tips, and tricks to start to bring collaboration to the forefront within your teams and within your meetings as well. And so, Gail, before we jump into the set of questions, Jen, if you could launch the poll for us, that would be great. And as Gail mentioned, it's really just a way for us to start to tailor some of our questions and answers as well. So we'll give everyone just a moment here to complete the poll.
And Jessica, we made it really short. And also the questions are deliberately designed to help you learn more about each other. I know many of you, I can't see you as a collaborator, that's challenging, but let me just give you a wave and say hi, and hopefully we'll learn more about you when you share with us your poll information.
Awesome. So the poll is up now. Thank you so much, Gail and Jessica. We have about 4 or 5 people complete. So we'll just give a couple more moments.
Yeah, so Jessica, what I'm seeing right now is an interesting trend that most of the people joining us today influence final decisions. Nobody yet makes final decisions. And another third of the group communicates to influence others. And the lowest group so far is executing. And I suspect that everybody here does a combination of all those things. They could only pick one.
Perfect. All right. Wonderful. So let's dive in right away. So Gail, thanks for setting the context in terms of the definition of collaboration. I think a lot of the times the word collaboration may get misused or how people define it. There's different kind of nuances to it. So I love this idea where it's agreement and disagreement in order to come to the best possible solution. And of course, going through the process of collecting perspectives takes time. So one of the first questions we have is, often people say that they don't have time to collaborate, and especially now in light of everything that's happening, it's let's just get to the final answer and let's not go through the process that we need to. I guess, what's your perspective on this, and how would you recommend that people still collaborate and do it efficiently and effectively?
The first suggestion is using COIN. COIN is an acronym that stands for committed, open, invested, and non-defensive. And so to get everybody on your team to recognize that if they're committed to collaboration, they need to be committed to the goals. So if you're really pressed for time, the first thing to do is to indicate very quickly, the goal of this email, the goal of our conversation is to make sure our customers are satisfied. And start with the goal first. There's a tendency for people to dig into the weeds. So they're focusing on the deadline and the details. And right now, people are overwhelmed. You don't see my dog. You don't see a 4-month-old toddler walking across somebody's room, but everybody has that. And so it's really important to be more focused. The second one for open is to be willing to consider others' ideas. So to emphasize very quickly that it's really important to look at the bigger picture. So if somebody says that isn't going to work, you can say to them in a remote conversation, thanks for the feedback. how does that relate to our goals? So bring them back. The non-defense is real critical. The second suggestion when you're in a remote environment is to have some type of an agreed upon goal statement that appears at the very top of your email. For instance, on your subject line, you could say something like, Project X designed to increase customer awareness. And so every time you're communicating, you're reminding somebody about the collaboration. And that's a really important part, is to make sure that everybody is aligned to the same goal.
Perfect. Thank you. And so kind of building off of that, I think one of the roadblocks was the timing. So I think what I'm hearing from you is being as specific as possible in what you're asking people for, and making it easy for them to contribute. I think we've all experienced some individuals who are resistant or reluctant to collaborate for different reasons. One, again, I think there's the timing element. Two, especially now in light, again, of everything that's going on, is people don't want to seem as though they're being difficult. And through collaboration, like we said, if we're going back to this, the idea of agreement and disagreement, coming in with different perspectives, people may find that they're going to kind of be that odd one out that's pushing back on an idea or someone. So what are your suggestions in terms of how to collaborate with someone who doesn't want to, and helping them understand the benefit and working through that?
I agree that right now we're seeing people that are either overly excited about more collaboration, like me, and other people that are either resistant to change or introverts or just don't want to be involved. Again, being on Zoom is exhausting, as everybody knows. And so I have 3 suggestions. The first suggestion is to make sure that you build a one-on-one relationship with them in a quick way. So that would be to ask them about some of the challenges they're facing, even if it's a question of what is going on in your world right now that's a challenge. The second suggestion is collaboration means different things to different people. It doesn't necessarily mean sharing information as step 1. It means understanding the key purpose why you're both connected. And so one of the suggestions for that is to share with them in the beginning. I am asking for some information because we want to make sure that our customers are well taken care of. Can you give me an update? I realize that you're working on other things. And just to keep giving them that same message. The third is to have a conversation with them, or have someone else have a conversation with them that reinforces the ground rules for remote work. That right now, because we're all working remotely, to be more efficient, we need some way of updating. I highly recommend Loom. It's Loom, and it's a great visual where you can actually send a message. Let's say that I'm talking to all of you in my office. I have a message, and it just my picture appears, and I can just say, hi Ben, thanks for chatting with me yesterday. How's the dog? I understand that there's a lot of information that you're still working on. Can you just give me this one piece of information? So the third suggestion is smaller chunks. Ask for less each time, because people are overwhelmed.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think building off of that as well a little bit is, I think a lot of it starts with also the culture of the organization, and for people to feel as though they're in a safe space to collaborate. And again, going back to this notion of disagreement is not a bad thing. Can you speak to that a little bit, and what you've seen in organizations, how they've overcome that and how they've set the tone that we're in a safe space and together we'll come to the right solution, and it's okay to have polarizing opinions on different things?
Yeah, Jessica, that's a great question. I think that a lot of people that are assertive make the wrong conclusion that just by saying, feel free to disagree, feel free to say what you think, they assume that everybody in the room is assertive. And somebody who is more focused on comfort and trust won't say anything unless they feel they're being listened to. And so I think what's really important, number 1, is the language of disagreement. The language of disagreement is acknowledging what someone says without criticizing it. So if someone says, I don't think that will work because, or that's a great idea, but, all you have to do afterwards is say, I hear what you're saying about, could you expand on that? If you're wanting somebody to voice an opinion, they have to really feel that it's being listened to. So the second suggestion is making sure that at every discussion you have an update. In the last meeting, these people recommended this, and these are some things we're doing about it. Just like, for instance, a poll. We just did a poll, and everyone here may not know what other people are coming from in terms of a perspective. So just by my sharing with you, here's the trend, these are where people are coming from, it gives everybody a better understanding as to the bigger picture. I think the final one about disagreement is that it has to be top down and bottom up. And so the senior leaders really have to be collaborative in their mindset. And in my book, I talk about that, and it's called a collaborative mindset. And the big part of it is being invested in the time it takes, but also being disciplined in going through a 4-stage process for disagreement. And that's discovery, discussion, disagreement, and agreement. So for instance, it would be something like, I'd like to hear from those of you who disagree. Could you please share with me what and why? And just putting all your arguments aside. So people disagree without anybody else challenging them. So everybody has a chance to identify what they don't agree with. And then you go back rather than being sidetracked. Those work very well in a discussion. Again, practice. I recommend that when people disagree, you should get them to start small. Like, get them to disagree about what time they're going to go for a break. Because most groups don't have group norms for how they disagree. So when I work with teams on behalf of CSPN and we help people to do more collaboration, the first thing I recommend, and I do it when I work with teams as well for our programs, is how are we going to disagree? And so we set ground rules for disagreement so people feel safe.
Perfect. And so as part of the how to disagree, do you have any kind of very tangible tips and tricks, especially in this virtual environment? Because I find body language, tone, you spoke a little bit to the language of disagreement, but any suggestions for people, again, given that a lot of this now is happening virtually, of when you go through that process, how do you come across as professional yet a level of empathy or being empathetic to the conversation, to making sure that you're portraying yourself in the right capacity?
That's another good question. Right now, as I'm speaking, I see Jen smiling at me in her picture. I see Olivia with a big O. I see Jenna with a kaleidoscope. I see Paula with nothing. As I look through the others, I see Anita with a smile, and I see Anas, Liz, Amy, and Susan. So one of the things is that we like our privacy when we're doing remote communications. It's really important to make sure that when you are having a discussion and disagreement, that you can see the people. So one is ground rules for letting people know that at certain parts in the conversation, you need to reveal yourself so that you can see that body language. Mm-hmm. And I know people may be distracted, they may be double tasking, they may have distractions in their environment, it may not be ideal. And yet seeing that body language makes a big difference. The other thing is empathy has a lot to do with your voice tone. How you're communicating using upward and downward inflections. You can see that I'm a very animated presenter, so I have a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. There are other people that may not. And so just getting a feeling, oh, there, Anita revealed herself. Hi, Anita. You can say, you can go back to your privacy of your location. But, there's Jen, so hi. So, those are opportunities to kind of build that trust. And I think also building empathy comes from including people in the discussion. So I think it's really important to do a lot of polls, to ask questions, to make references to, here's what I'm learning about you, here's what I heard about you. That helps. Empathy is hard, though, to compensate for when you're not one-on-one. See, I notice a lot of people reveal themselves, even though I didn't require you to. Hi, nice to see you. I see Anas smiling. But I mean, empathy is also understanding that you want to put yourself in their place. Like I know right now that the people that are joining us are from all over the country. Some of you are directors, some of you are founders, some of you are executors, some of you are systems analysts, and you're on different time zones and you have different requirements. And so just by acknowledging that in the beginning of the conversation, by letting people know that you're aware there are distractions, setting up ground rules is a way of showing empathy. And also responding to comments, getting rid of the word but. Instead of saying, I know you're busy, but, just cancel that and use the word and.
That's a good one. I like that. I think we often use that word without realizing how common it is.
Yeah, it's part of everyday conversation.
Yeah, just like the word
Yeah, exactly.
So pivoting a little bit here, I want to talk about kind of from two lenses. The first one being from if for individuals that are more, I guess, in an executor role who don't always feel they have the opportunity to be innovative. And I think the word innovative and collaborative go kind of hand in hand together. They are different, but to be innovative, collaboration is a tool that you can use to get there. But people that feel that they're in a role that doesn't allow for that, or that's not their kind of the focus of their role, what recommendations do you have for them to step outside of the box and be able to still bring in collaboration and innovation and to be able to do it again effectively and efficiently?
Jess, that's a great question. I have 4 suggestions. The first suggestion is small to big. A lot of people think of innovation as this way out of the box thing that has nothing to do with your job. But innovation could be as simple as changing a column on a business analysis Excel spreadsheet and changing the heading.
Yeah.
So innovation is about doing things differently. It's about thinking differently. It's about acting differently. It's about responding differently. And it's about communicating that for buy-in and commitment from others. And so that's the first suggestion. The second suggestion is to think about the goal. And then think about the other people that you're working with. So if I were to approach someone in the group, let's just say it would be Paula, and I would go to Paula and say, Paula, you don't have to respond to this. I see you've got your audio down. You know, Paula, I have a suggestion for you that might save a half an hour of every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to get better buy-in than if I say, Paula, I need $10,000. Can I have it? You know, instead of saying what you need in terms of the time and the deliverables and all those things that all of us are so overwhelmed by focusing on the outcome, it gets a better response. So that's a second suggestion. The third suggestion is innovation has a lot to do with just sharing your brain. And so very often I will say to someone, and I know Olivia is joining us, she's my virtual assistant, and she knows this very well in working with me. And so is Liz. Liz works with me as well, both of them with virtual alternatives. Is I will sometimes say, my brain doesn't work that way, you know, and so bear with me. Here's what I'm thinking. And I think we have great opportunities with remote to share flip charts remotely and to share flow charts and to share visuals and to work with whiteboarding, to draw things and collaborate. I think that's another opportunity to say, let me draw for you. Let me show you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And then the fourth suggestion for innovation is to get the buy-in from top down. And I know that's another question that some of you are dealing with. How do you deal with a leader that's not innovative, that's pushing innovation, and every time you promote the idea, they shut it down? Mm-hmm. And I think one of those suggestions is to focus on the results first. You know, I have an idea that will help us to do this. And then get them to be part of the process. Get them to share an idea and make them feel like it's their own. Those are my suggestions.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think the visual element is so important. So many people are such visual learners and visual to digest the information and to be able to collaborate that way. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of great tools. I know within WebEx, being able to use virtual whiteboards and flip charts, being able to cluster and theme different things as well is really important. I think often during group discussions, especially during different trainings and seminars, it's great to verbally say something, but to be able to take all that information and, as you would do in an in-person session, start to cluster it, create themes, and make sense of it. That way is really important. Just touching on your last point there, is there anything else that you want to add? I think so. The answer that you had was great from the one lens of you're not a typical innovator, but how do you become innovative? On the flip side of that is if you are an innovative person, but you find the person that you're reporting into, your boss, is not, and they're more results focused. What do you find is the best approach for still being able to go through the process of innovation and collaboration, but knowing that they're more focused on the outcome, not the input to get to the outcome?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because that's the other side. You know, there's 5 different kinds of people when you deal with innovation. There's the strategist that focuses on the vision. There's the innovator that loves to brainstorm ideas. And if you give them an idea, they say, well, what's Google doing? What's HPS doing? What's HSBC doing? Then you got the tactical person, and all they care about is, am I going to get this done and check it off my list? Yeah. Then there's the analytical person that's thinking, you know, why did this happen and what's the problem and how do we solve it? And so the people that are more likely to be resistant to innovation are the ones that are very pragmatic. And now that we're in a remote environment, we're overloaded with too much to do and too little time. I think the first thing that overwhelms people is worrying about executing it. So my suggestion, if you're trying to get people to be innovative, is to isolate the idea from the execution. Reassure people that you'll find a way to work it out. And as a ground rule, don't cover anything practical about, how much it costs or when it's due. Focus purely on the ideation of it, and empathize with those people that have a hard time doing it. Mm-hmm. So another suggestion I have that relates to that, Jessica, is giving people a chance to try it in small things. So I think a lot of people that are innovative take for granted that most of them are whole brained. They're linear, but they also can remember the blue file versus the file that's alphabetically ordered. And a lot of people don't think that way. So getting someone, for instance, how can we change our remote work scheduling form to make it more innovative would be a start. And for somebody that's not innovative, they're thinking, well, why would I need to change the form? What difference does the color make? And the innovative person's coming up with all these ideas, draw a giant apple on the top. And the person that is tactical is probably thinking, get a life, I have more things to do. And so getting them to be more comfortable with thinking about how to make things different. Innovation is just about how to make it different, how to make it better would be a suggestion. Mm-hmm. A final suggestion for people that are innovative is being focused on chunking it. Mm-hmm. Step 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, for instance, maybe you have a short meeting that's 15 minutes long. That's about all people can take nowadays with a remote. And all you do is kind of get people to be aware of the fact that what you're doing now is causing some problems for other people. So we need to think about how we do it. Mm-hmm. And then the next meeting, you identify, what are some ways that we can improve it. And you get the tactical people and the analytical people to be part of the process. The analytical and tactical people want to know where they're going, where the to-do list is. They want to structure things. So my final suggestion is giving the process some structure. Mm-hmm. And in my book, I talk about 4. One is the exploration. I call it discovery, where you kind of discovering and exploring things. And then you move into proposing the idea. And then you disagree, what do you think? What do you disagree with? What could be changed? And then your final is agreement.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think for one of the interesting things you were touching on is innovation really is a spectrum, right? And so I think a lot of the times people think innovation is drastic changes, but it's really anything micro to macro change. And it's not something that happens overnight, but it's getting people to understand that continuum and the why behind it. And that's where, as you start to collaborate, one of the things that I found is really helpful is in creating that why or that justification is bringing in the customer research, the employee research side of it as well, to help create, this is why we're starting to drive innovation. This is why we're collaborating to come up with a new solution. Not only is it going to set the why, but it's also going to give you some insights to help set the direction of what the possible solution could be as well in the future. And so making sure you're coming with the right data to the table, if you will.
Yeah, and there are wonderful ways you can do that remotely. You can have customers visit you and talk about their concerns. You can show videotapes. You can provide guest speakers to come and join you. And it's much more affordable now with remote. So those are really important. Simon Sinek's TED Talk video on understanding the why behind leadership is a great video I'd highly recommend to people. Talks a lot about that. And then finally, the most important thing about understanding the why is getting people to kind of have a commitment to what the benefits of that are. If we get more customers engaged, then that will build our business. And so I think a lot of people tend to be thinking more about their part and they don't see the bigger picture. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this kind of touches on something else as well, is we've talked a lot about collaboration internally amongst teammates, but the collaboration that organizations have with their customers. And I think, to your point, Gail, that is so important, especially right now, is truly being able to empathize, understand, and put yourself in the customer's shoes. And going into this new virtual world that we're all in, and who knows how long we're going to be in it for. I know we use a great tool called Recollective, which is a customer research platform that allows you to conduct focus groups, to assign homework almost, if you will, to understand different points within the customer journey, to collect their feedback, and to interact both in real time and through pre and post recorded sessions as well. And so being able to harvest that data, use that again, like we were saying, as a tool to go into these ideation or innovation sessions is really insightful and important for so many companies.
Yeah, and to build on that, people are overwhelmed with too much information. Like what you're all going to get is a one-page summary of all the ideas. And that's it. And I think being careful about what you share with people so that you just don't inundate them and overwhelm them with too much. If you can make it one picture rather than 5 pages, so much the better.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we have a tendency, a lot of people have a tendency that more is better, but it's actually harder, I find, to make something simple and digestible versus here's 10 pages of the why or the how-to behind something.
I mean, I'm a collaborative specialist and I don't read everything. So if I don't read everything, I can imagine the other people that are joining us don't read everything either. I mean, I'm admitting it. A lot of people are not. And so, they have limited time. The hours are also very weird. People are not necessarily working 9 to 5. Some people might be working late at night, early in the morning. And so you want them to read something. So you really need to be selective about what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're approaching the 1:30 mark. Before we jump into questions from the audience, just one last question that I wanted to throw out to you. And you touched on this a little bit already, but just given everything that's happening right now in the environment and the stressors that people are feeling right now, what are some kind of tips, tricks, or what are your perspective to help people still be innovative, to go through this process knowing that everyone is exhausted? Like you said, we all have Zoom fatigue. There's a lot going on. We're all multitasking, but we still know that this collaboration and innovation is just as important now as it ever has been, especially as so many companies are rapidly pivoting to not only accommodate employees, but to accommodate customers as well. So any kind of final thoughts around that?
Yeah, I have 3 suggestions. Number 1 is to set goals for small baby steps for how you are going to make some of those changes and acknowledge and applaud them. For instance, I meet with a group of collaborators weekly as we're exploring Zoom and MS Teams and WebEx and other ways of expanding the way we support our customers. And yesterday, one of the participants in the group said, gee, there's so much to learn, but I just want to stop for a moment. We're doing this so much better than we did a month ago. Mm-hmm. And so I think acknowledging something that's changed, that you've improved, can help you to feel that you're making progress. Mm-hmm. I think that the second suggestion is that when you are trying to collaborate and deal in a remote environment for innovation and change, is to break it down into milestones that have dates and times. And then once you've broken it down, and this is a really good tip, break it down again. Like you think that you could do it. For instance, what you could normally do in a one day of work with fatigue, I'm sure I represent everybody here, that you're more exhausted than before. So set more realistic time frames for doing things. The third suggestion is look at it and ask if you can cut out any steps, eliminate any steps, or do it in a different way. And try one new thing a week, even if it's just a different way of using Zoom.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. What we're going to do now, Jenna, I'll pass it off to you. If we want to turn it over to the audience to see if they have any specific questions for Gail or myself. And if you do, you can go ahead and type your questions in the chat box, as well as use the raise hand feature. So Jenna, I'll let you to moderate that. Do we have any questions, Jenna?
Oh, so sorry, I was on mute. Oh, perfect. We have a question from Paula. She said, I missed what the I and the N stand for in quantum.
Yeah, okay. And Paula, if you missed it, other people missed it. And I have to admit, I invented it, and I even have to refer to it. So there we go. So COIN stands for committed, open, invested, and non-defensive. And when I wrote this book, I wrote it so that people could find it useful. And my role today is not to promote the book, it's to promote the importance of innovation and change. So committed is being willing to collaborate. So you actually sit down with someone and get them to be willing. Open is being willing to consider others' ideas, even if you don't disagree. Invested is to dedicate the time, and non-defensive. And of those four, Paula, I would say the non-defensive is the most important part of COIN.
Perfect.
That was a good question.
Wonderful. Thank you so
More
much,
like
Gail.
questions.
Yeah, we'll give everyone just a couple minutes to get their thoughts together. I know there was a lot of great information that you ladies shared this afternoon.
I have a question for Jessica.
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Jessica is featured in this book. So for those of you that are CSPN, yes, Jessica's very modest about this. She's actually in chapter 7, which is on overcoming obstacles to collaboration and collaborating for innovation and change. And I only interviewed 5 people for quotes. So Jessica's one of those 5. Jessica, what's your favorite method for remote collaboration? What software tool or what method do you like the most?
So one of the ones that I'm a huge fan of is the idea of opposite thinking. So again, I think you talked a little bit about getting your right and left brain activated, and getting people to think outside of their comfort zone. And so one of the ways that we do this is when we're given a problem is to have people list individually what are the different assumptions that they have about that specific problem. So if you have a piece of paper on the left side, writing down what are all your assumptions around this problem, and then being able to share that back with the team. And then on the right side, have everyone pick one of the assumptions and write down what are one of the possibilities or the realities around those assumptions. So they get them thinking around, okay, if customer demand is going down, one of the assumptions we have is that it's because it's not easy to use our product. But then on the flip side, what are the realities around that? So having each person pick one of the assumptions on the right side of the paper, having them go through and think about what are the realities, being able to share that back together as a team, and then from there get into solutioning. And so being able to start with looking at it kind of the negatives to the positives to the solution becomes a really interesting way for people to collaborate together. Roblox up front.
For those people joining us, I just want to let you know that I do have in the learning summary, there is a summary of Jessica's points on opposite thinking and also Crawford slip, which is another approach. We're providing suggestions on COIN, connection for trust, and also the partner approach, which focuses on innovative options. So a lot of what Jessica's talking about will be in the tip sheet. So thanks, Jessica. That's great.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. We do have one more question. And Ash is wondering, how is the role of innovation different during the pandemic?
Oh, that's a really good question. Jessica, do you want to answer that first? Because I think both of us could answer that one. I'm interested in what you think. Again, typical collaborator, I want to hear you first.
Absolutely. So I think the role of innovation is becoming important for different reasons. One, I think that companies are going through it a lot faster than they traditionally have because companies have had to pivot relatively quickly. And so I know CSPN, for example, just to give context, is primarily instructor-led, now going to a virtual delivery and platform. And so how do we do that effectively and efficiently? So the pace at which we were innovating to get to that has changed. And I think we've seen that with so many companies as well. You look at the restaurant industry going from primarily dining in to takeout. You look at organizations like hairdressers, kind of that example I thought was really interesting, and how they quickly pivoted. And that they can't do in-person services, but being able to come up with innovative products and solutions. So reaching out to their customers and saying, hey, we have your hair color, let us ship it to you. Here's a how-to video of how to do it. And so I think it's really about the pace of innovation. A lot of companies, what we've seen is they've taken this micro approach to innovation. So they haven't totally pivoted, but what they've done is they've done incremental baby steps to get to where they are today, starting all the way from March to June. And again, in order to do that, it really was tied to the pace of it. And so I guess to answer the question again, it was the timing of innovation, and it was being able to take these micro steps in order to adjust to this new reality. And I think the last point that we've seen so much, and I think this is a huge positive as well, is that it was interesting in working with so many of our clients, this whole notion of managing a remote workforce and having everyone work from home was such a stretch for people to get there. And it was seen as such a challenge. But within the span of a week to 2 weeks for so many companies, they were able to deploy that. And so I think that set the precedence that, you know what, we can sit here all day and talk about Roblox and how difficult things are going to be. But to Gail's point, when we start to innovate and ideate is let's put those aside. Let's focus on what the end solution needs to be, and then we can get to the process of how to get there. So I think the positive out of this pandemic is that it showed how companies can innovate. It showed the pace at which they can do it, and they showed that traditional roadblocks have been broken down or have been destroyed, which I think is amazing.
So you see me in my environment. This is where I hang out, and I've been here for over 20 years. So for me, working at home and working remotely, two very different things. And so I think that now with the pandemic, there are some changes that have happened with innovation and change. And the most predominant one is that people that are change leaders like myself are thriving in the sense that, oh, finally people get it. They get that you can't look at things in black and white, and you have to constantly change the way you think. I think that innovative leaders are having a great opportunity now through bad circumstances, but still it's an opportunity to be more empathetic towards those people that are not innovative, that don't understand innovation and don't understand how to change, and to understand how hard it is to do that learning curve. And so I think that the pandemic is not going to go away in terms of the mindset. Things will never be the same as they were. I think people will, now they've been exposed to ambiguity. I remember early on in the pandemic watching Trudeau answering questions about when this is going to end, and people wanted to know exactly. And as an innovative leader, I'm thinking, well, there is no answer. We try something today and we reinvent it tomorrow. So to your comments, Jessica, I think that hopefully organizational cultures will recognize that they have to change their organizational structure, even the job types, the job scope. I think there'll be jobs that will be no longer used anymore. I think there'll be new roles coming in. And I think that hopefully innovation won't be something to talk about. For instance, there are a few people in the group that are government people. I think I'm sick of hearing digital transformation. I hear that all the time. And it's not a very innovative way of saying it. So the way that you lead people will change. And also I think innovative leaders need to understand more about thinking styles in order to get people to go along with them and to get their buy-in and commitment.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail. And I see we have one more question from Anita. She is wondering, as leaders, how do you suggest we reframe from our current maintenance mode into driving innovation and change to succeed in this new environment?
Okay, you can see me leaning in because it was a little hard to hear, but I did hear you. So that's great. Great question. The first one is reframe to change the game. I mean, that's really clear. Think about what you're going to call the change. You know, digital transformation for me is so overwhelming. You know, I hear it all the time and I'm sick of it. But it is something I work with my clients to do. And then that's a typical frame that I hear from a lot of my government clients. Here we go again. I keep hearing that. So changing the way that you frame it. The other is to, instead of focusing on what you're doing, focus on the why you're doing it. You know, so change the name that has to do with, for instance, recently I worked with an IT department and they wanted to make their IT consultation process more user-friendly. So they came up with the leadership change and they named it make us the most popular department in the organization. And that was what they focused on. I think another suggestion and final suggestion is when you're leading the change to kind of sweeten the approach, is to do it in phases so that you're not hitting everybody with it all together. I mean, just getting people to show up and be aware that they need to change is one step. Mm-hmm. There's 4 steps in the change process. There's denial, resistance, exploration, and change adaptation. It's called DREC. And I recommend you might want to do more reading about that. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about this when she stole it from someone else, but she's credited in the healthcare industry for denial, resistance, exploration, and change leadership. And so you can take your change and break it down in those 4 phases. That would be another way to help you manage the stress and get good productivity out of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think just adding on that, one last thought I had is, since this started in March, we found most organizations went through kind of generic phases, if you will. First was the emergency response phase, which was, oh my God, our organization got turned upside down. What do we do? And now they're in the recovery phase, and then they have the reactivate phase. So similar to what our province is going through as well. And I think people are now, they're out of that emergency response. They're thinking about the reactivation of saying, we can't forever operate in this response phase because we're not going to get anywhere as an organization. Right. We still have to work to our 5-year strategic plans. We have to build on our goals, and we have to keep moving forward. And so that being able to break it down in that kind of simple structure and being able to understand what are the different priorities, the different activities, and the different tasks that fall within each of those is really important.
Because and also talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you get caught up in the firefighting all the time, and we don't start to plan for the future. And I think we've all accepted that we're in this new reality. And again, I apologize for saying that so much because it's one of those overused terms. But we are where we are, and we need to figure out how do we start to move forward. We've taken the time to digest, to understand, and now it's about saying, okay, this is how we're going to move forward. This is how we're going to support our customers. This is how we're going to support our people. And it's great to see that in working with so many of our clients that they really are in that in that second phase there before they get into the reactivation.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the survival mode and to talk about it. You know, what mistakes did we make? What did we learn? Mm-hmm. And I think that just moving in and saying to people, okay, now you're organized, now we've got to move forward, is a mistake. Because when you're dealing with innovation, you're dealing with how people's mindsets are changing, and what didn't work is almost as important as what did work. So getting people to talk about, you know, think about the beginning of the pandemic. What were some of your survival challenges? And what did you learn from that? What could we apply to that? I think that's really important. So not saying goodbye to it, but using it to help create new ideas for the next phase, which is now that we've survived, how do we now move into more normalcy?
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gail and Jessica, for providing your insights. So I don't see any additional questions, and I know that we've reached our end time for our session today.
That's great. We're finishing on time. Fantastic.
Yes, we are. So I am going to send out our feedback poll. If everyone could take a couple minutes and complete that for us. And I'd also really like to thank Gail for joining us today.
My pleasure.
For providing us with so much information and so much insight, and Jessica as well. I think it's great to have a collaborative, ironically, a collaborative session like this based on our topic today. I think it was really valuable and it was great, and we really look forward to receiving everyone's feedback. So thank you so much. And Gail, if you'd like to say anything to close off our session, or Jessica, please go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank you and Jessica and all the people that attended. We're available to answer questions. Even though this session is ending, feel free to reach out to Jenna and Jessica if there's anything else we can do to support you or to share resources.
Perfect. Yes. And be sure to stay tuned. We do have a series of other Spotlight interviews coming up, which will be facilitated both by myself, David Singh, another partner, and Corey Atkinson, who's our VP of Learning Development. So thank you, everyone, and hopefully you're enjoying this sunny afternoon.
Good luck with your innovation.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye, Jessica. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Gail.